IVM.
So welcome to another week on IVM. If you aren't following us on social media, please do. We're IVM Podcast on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. This week on Simblified in a shorty, Naren and Shrikit simplify the phenomena of near-death experiences with interesting cases and scientific theories. On Pragati, Pawan and Hamsani are joined by economic policy expert Yazad Jal to discuss negative and positive rights. On the scene and the unseen, Amit Verma is joined by stand-up comedian Aditi Mittal and our production controller Swati to discuss misogyny and popular culture. On Pulyabazi, Saurav and Pranay speak to Shruti Rajgopalan about the meaning and importance of property rights in India. This week on Shunya One, we have Suchita Salwan, founder and CEO of LBP, a local recommendations platform striving to discover all things new and old. On Hustle Science, Ranveer and Tejaswan speak to their buddy, tech entrepreneur and founder of Hello Inc., Angad Nadkarni, to understand his coding craze and a lot more about his stories. And now, on to your shows.
Hello and welcome to Simblified. Today we have a very special shorty, what we like to call a very short 10-minute, quick, easy, listen on the go, sandas mein baith ke sun sakta hai types show for you. And also, since it's so short and Chuck is in currently very long form mood, has decided to completely skip this particular episode and dedicate himself to his work instead, the corporate slave that he is. But anyway, we do have the entrepreneur himself, extraordinaire, Mr. Narendra Shenoy, and he has an excellent and amazing topic for us today. And Naren, what's our topic?
Well, I'm going to talk about the very uplifting topic called near-death experiences.
Of course.
So not the cheerish thing you might expect.
It's cheery enough. It's near death, right?
It's
you
near
didn't
death,
die.
yeah.
So it's cool. Yeah.
So I was reading about near-death experiences somewhere, and I found that intriguing, and then I read some more, and before you knew what was happening, I had a simplified shorty sort of bubbling inside.
I think what
me.
you just described is like the fundamental of why this podcast was founded.
Have you seen this movie Aliens?
No, I have not.
They have those aliens inside, and then they sort of rip out
their stomach.
So that shorty is like inside, and it's like, yeah. So I'm gonna probably die after this, but the shorty will be out.
Yeah, I know. Nowadays, like it's so crazy. Like I read about anything new, and I'm always evaluating its simplified potential.
Yeah.
Like, isko kar sakte hai kya? Or is it like too dumb to simplify, or am I too dumb to simplify this? That's where the evaluation usually is at. But yes, Naren, near-death experiences.
Yeah.
What have you read?
So basically, let's start with what a near-death experience is. So it's a personal experience associated with death or impending death, but which obviously you don't die, so you come back and talk about it. And
or do you?
Yeah.
But okay.
So most of us have had, we have a reasonable idea of what a near-death experience might be. You see it in the movies, you sort of imagine what death can be. It's supposed to happen while you're in the actual process of dying, but you don't actually die, right? So you get to talk about it.
Yeah.
Because
So, I mean, I think there's also, this has also been interesting where there is a near-death experience which is... there is an anecdotal near-death experience and there's probably a scientific near-death experience as well. Where anecdotal near-death experiences, I would almost put... they could have been near-death, but it's basically a close shave. So, for example, if you were... I slipped on the road and fell and a truck went by my face.
Yeah.
Now, you got away with something, but you were if your face had come in contact with the truck, you would have been in a lot of trouble. But it whizzed past you, so your bodily, you didn't have any problems.
Those are experiences which will definitely cure you of your constipation. But those are not the ones I'm talking about.
The other near-death experiences, what I presume you're talking about, are where medically you have been close to death and you have gotten away from.
So there are very interesting reasons which we'll get into why they have. So there is a guy named Dr. Kenneth Ring, who is a professor emeritus of psychology at the University of Connecticut, who sort of studied NDEs, near-death experiences, and he placed them on a 5-stage continuum, and that is, the first stage is peace. So you're like dying and you're at peace. Second stage is the body separation, where you feel your spirit leaving the body. Third stage is entering darkness. So that is your spirit has left your body and is entering a dark space. And after it goes through the dark space, the stage 4 is seeing the light, and 5th stage is entering the light. So this is based on his study of people who had near-death experiences. So imagine, like, you have, maybe a concussion or something. People who have had heart attacks have experienced this, and they would go through. So he found that 60% of those who reported near-death experiences had experienced stage 1, that is peace. And only about 10% had gone right up to stage 5, which was entering the light.
So it's possible to come back from stage 5 also?
Yeah. Obviously, unless they come back, they can't interview.
Yeah. I think you can't define a stage where you can't come back from anyway. Like, udhar gaya to वापस नहीं आया.
Slight catch, it is वापस नहीं आया.
इसलिए 5 है, छठा हो सकता है, but I don't think we can come back from there.
So apparently, during an NDE...
But again, another thing that you said somewhere over there, Naren, is about, which also can cause some controversy, is the word spirit.
Yes.
Where you said, like, okay, the spirit leaving your body. And now a lot of people might dispute what is this thing called a spirit.
Correct.
Where you're saying, does that exist? It's almost on par of saying soul or atma or whatever it might be. Is spirit in any way scientifically provable?
No. So, and I'm an atheist, so I don't believe in any of this. So these are tricks that play on your brain, possibly because you would be going through a stage of acute, where your brain is undergoing an acute stress. For example, when you have a heart attack,
fair enough,
there is no blood supply to the brain momentarily.
Yeah.
And yet, it is not so long that the brain dies. It comes back.
Yeah.
But in that period of hypoxia,
there's hallucinations that can happen.
Weird things happen. And the brain is so complex that it plays out different for different people.
Exactly, So, but sorry, you were saying something about the...
describing the near-death experiences, you might hear strange noises and have feelings of blissful peace sweeping over you. So this is what people... so you hear noises, apparently.
Right.
And you have a feeling of peace which envelops you. And then you just float out of your body. That's what a lot of people report, towards a tunnel. Okay, and you've seen this probably in movies also. All these trashy B-grade movies where,
don't go into the light.
And your beloved is on the other side. And as you get closer to the light, you are met by somebody who's already dead and who tells you that this is not your time, and regretfully you're plunged back into the planet and you have to go to office next morning. The screw up, So this complex hallucination comes from your own personal theater of mind, is what most neurologists, neuroscientists believe, right? So it's not really, it just feels like it's a spirit floating, this, that and the other, but it's actually just your mind playing tricks on you. And near-death experiences have a pretty recent history, so as far as the published literature goes. So in 1926, a guy named William Barrett, who was a fellow of the Royal Society. I don't know why all these people are fellows. Anyway, she published a slim volume on deathbed visions, in which the survivors described to him the basic elements of near-death experiences. And it is supposed to happen when you're in the actual process of dying, but you don't actually die, and you get to talk. So NDE became very popular after this 1926 thing, got really took off in 1975, because a guy named Raymond Moody wrote a best-selling book called Life After Life. And that recounted anecdotes of over 50 survivors of near-death experiences. So at first, there was some resistance to the concept of near-death experiences, but it was found to be pretty common, and common across cultures and this thing. So you would have very, very similar experiences, in different cultures as well. And there is another interesting theory, and this is something which one of our mutual friends, Krish Ashok, told me about. It's a book called A Hero with 1,000 Faces, I think.
Right.
Okay, written by this guy named Joseph Campbell. It's a classic. It's called it's called The Hero's Journey, and according to a researcher named Alana Karen, the NDE stages resemble the hero's journey. And I feel obliged to explain what a hero's journey is. So in comparative mythology, so there is a field called comparative mythology, and people sat down and compared the myths of all cultures, and they found a lot of things common, right?
Like Krishna with Achilles and stuff like that.
That kind of thing. So the common template is it's a broad category of tales that involve a hero who goes out on an adventure. The hero is ordinary guy. He goes out on an adventure. There is a decisive crisis. He wins a victory, and then he comes back. But when he comes back, he is transformed. He's now become a supreme. So this near-death experience is a lot like that.
Yeah.
So that suggests that somewhere inside, it is the mind playing tricks, because one of the reasons why we have comparative mythology is myths seem to play out in the same way in the human mind across culture. So it's culture independent. And that's why that book is fantastic. Joseph Campbell's book. Please do read it. Yeah.
In fact, I think that's very interesting also in the way that despite the fact that we might think that, oh my God, there are so many different people around the world, and we are racially so different and even divided in a lot of cases, humans among all creatures are the least genetically different from each other. Humans as a species.
Yes.
We are very genetically similar to each other. In fact, we are too genetically similar, which...
just incredibly similar.
Incredibly similar. So, I think what it does is also the way we are coded is also very, very similar. There's very minute differences in the way we are genetically and even physiologically and physically coded. So I feel when, say for example, you're going through a near-death experience, and I think it's almost like it's a very similar kind of shutdown process, so to speak, where your brain starts going through a specific set of ways it's going to shut down. It's preparing to shut down, and the survivors are able to recount a process which got stopped at the very last second.
People who have worked on the old Unix computers would know that.
Yes, exactly.
Each demon shutting down one after the other.
Exactly. So it's a very structured process. So I think that if nothing else, this kind of near-death experiences show us how similar we are to each other, despite all the obvious differences we might have in terms of
external appearance,
language, race, culture, all of these things,
And so a quick recap of what, who has an NDE. So about 20% of all NDE survivors are survivors of heart attacks. Heart attacks are, if you survive a heart attack, you're quite likely to get a near-death experience. And similar levels from survivors of electrocution, survivors of coma, survivors of attempted suicide by hanging, near drowning, and massive shock due to blood loss. These are the categories where you are likely to have a near-death experience. And it can happen even when you're not close to dying, despite the D in NDE. For example, training of combat fighter pilots which involve very, very high G forces. They are placed in a centrifuge, turn around. A lot of bad things are done to these pilots. And when the G forces exceed a particular value, some of them experience a near-death experience. They report a near-death experience. And there's this guy named Dr. James Whittier, who was a former chief aeromedical scientist for the US Naval Air Warfare Center. He gathered data on 1,200 pilots. And out of 1,200, more than 200 reported near-death experience. A very high percentage So it is definitely the mind playing tricks on you because of things that are happening.
Yeah, I think it's almost like you kind of find out more about how the brain...
Correct.
What is the process? See, actually, the human brain especially seems like such a complex organ that seems so very distinct for every single person. But I think when pushed to the margins like this, like a near-death experience, I think we can kind of see the edges of similarity that we have between our brains and how they function. And I think years down the line when more advanced humans than us are probably listening to Simblified, although it defies all kinds of
belief. All other podcasts,
all other pieces of culture, they are listening to this podcast.
And would be rebooting human civilization from Simblified.
And would be laughing at how simple these primitive humans are at not being able to understand something as simple as a near-death experience. would kind of say that, okay, this is something pretty simple. Like, this is exactly what was happening. And they know exactly what the brain was doing at that point in time.
So this actually, it's, jokes apart, it's very, very interesting because it's all in the realm of consciousness. And we really don't know what consciousness is all about. And it's enormously complicated. And I think it could be a topic for another shorty or maybe a full-length episode.
Full-length episode,
sometime.
more like.
But for now, we can leave you with this fascinating thought of near-death experiences.
If you have personally had any very interesting near-death experiences where you have seen the light or the darkness or had peace or just are interested in it, please do write in. And yes, we will be doing many more of these episodes, especially our 100th one, which is coming up on the 28th of July at the Habitat at 4 p.m. There'll be a very special guest joining us. We'll also be doing all our very special segments like the profundities and simplifying all the topics that you might find interesting. You will find us screw up like we are right now, live in front of you. Please try not to heckle. It will only make things worse. And but do come. It'll be a barrel of laughs. And you can find the tickets on Insider as well as Book My Show. And so that's it for this shorty of Simplified. So we'll see you next week. Bye-bye.
There she stands, a podcast addict. Outside the bank, having traveled several miles to get in with other poor souls like her. The journey, though daunting for this youngling, will have some comfort because she has downloaded her favorite podcast. You can see more of her species on ivmpodcasts.com, your one-stop destination where you can check out the coolest Indian podcasts. Happy listening.